But when Brandi called me about this particular issue, and I shared with her under some circumstances that I'd heard about some other things that have gone on in the Commonwealth. But she really sparked so much interest into this particular issue, just about the way that she went, the ways that she addressed this particular issue and the information that went forward. Brandi is and I'm just going to give you a little history on her, and then her presentation will speak for itself. I am absolutely sure of that. She is an investigative journalist and documentary film director. She's a 2-time Emmy Award winner. Her reporting has brought critical issues to light across national news platforms, including her 2023 series and documentary, Uprooted, which sparked both local and national debates about racism and housing injustice. The series, which examines the displacement of Black communities by American colleges and universities, was based on Brandi's groundbreaking discovery of residence archive from a historic Black community in Newport News, Virginia. Produced in collaboration with ProPolitical and the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO, the series detailed how cities and colleges officials systematically destroyed the community starting in the 1960s by seizing over 60 acres of land to establish a permanent campus for Christopher Newport University, Uprooted. Further explores how American colleges and universities in Virginia and nationwide adopted similar practices driven by federal policies that prioritize higher education expansion over well-being of surrounding Black and brown neighborhoods. The series has received several accolades, including a Gracie Award, Columbia University, Topeka Prize, the Education Writers Association, and Brandi's first regional Emmy as a documentary filmmaker. In 2021, Brandi received a reporting grant from Columbia University, the Ira A. Lipman Center for Journalism and Civil and Human Rights, where she has focused on housing inequality in Newport News, Virginia. She has taught graduate-level journalism courses on multimedia storytelling at the S.I. Newhouse School of Public Communication at Syracuse University, where she earned a master's degree in broadcast and digital journalism. A Virginia native, she also holds a bachelor's degree in sociology from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. At this time, we welcome Brandi Kellam, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for that introduction. First, I want to make sure I have a presentation here that I want to present. So can everyone see okay, there yes. You go. All right. But first, I just want to break character just for a second because, just being in this room is extremely significant, right? As journalists, we cover communities and we cover issues that matter to them, and we dream of our reporting being examined in this way that could potentially create legislation or address these injustices, specifically for this commission, Black communities in Virginia that were displaced and erased by public colleges and universities in the state. And so I just wanted to say I am very grateful to be here. I'm very appreciative. Thank you so much, Delegate and now Chair Dolores McQuinn, for inviting me. I just wanted to take this time to present to you some of the reporting and then maybe delve into a little bit of the research, as you all might have some of these considerations when you are looking into this issue. And then just like a little overarching takeaway from what the reporting was and what we learned from everything. So I'm now going to start the presentation. Just give me a second. I'm going to open up my notes. Okay. And make sure I speak into the microphone. Okay, so as I said, I'm here today to present to you all reporting from Uprooted. It was a ProPublica and Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO investigative series. And as Delegate McQuinn mentioned in my bio, I am an investigative journalist and reporter in Virginia. I was the lead investigative journalist on this series, as well as the film director for the documentary that also accompanied the reporting that we did for Uprooted. So just a quick table of contents so you all can follow where I'm going with this. Just going to give a little background, talk about how the story was discovered, highlight a few Virginia colleges that we explored in the reporting, some central themes that we discovered, and then some research and takeaways. So this is just a quick little bit about me. I'm not going to get into my bio because that was already read, but I am from Virginia. I was born and raised here on the south side from Chesapeake, Virginia. I know a couple members here are from that area, Hampton Roads. And before working on this story, I was working in national news. I had covered a lot of stories of national significance. And it just sort of led me on this journey to wondering what I could do in bringing that experience to the state of Virginia. So I discovered this story and it brought me back here to Virginia. And I think this has been an ongoing investigation for the last 3 or 4 years. So I've been here back for a while covering this topic. And then as Delegate McQuinn mentioned, we also, as a series with ProPublica and the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism, the story that I discovered in Virginia became what you see here, which is a wealth of stories, information that had never really fully been publicly disclosed or uncovered about this neighborhood in Newport News, Virginia, that was erased by what is now Christopher Newport University, and then how other colleges across the state have done the same thing. In addition to some of the reporting challenges that we had, getting access to FOIA documents and public records, as well as the larger issue of how this manifests in present day or materializes in present day, with Christopher Newport as an example being a campus that, while erasing a Black community, also erased Black students and professors on campus through policies that pretty much eliminated their access to teaching and educational opportunities. And I have this QR code on the right just for technology purposes. You can scan that with your phone and it'll take you to the whole series. So let's just get a little bit into the discovery. As I mentioned, I came back to Virginia in 2021. And I'm getting into this because this kind of explains why this story is even a story today. As was said earlier, these are conversations that happen around the kitchen table for a lot of Black families in Virginia and beyond, to be quite honest. And for me, I'd never even heard of what happened to the community where Christopher Newport exists today, even being from here. And so to learn what happened, it was sort of like a shocking discovery for me to know that I never knew about that. And it led me to explore what else did I know about this story, given it was such a significant event to these residents in the 1950s and 60s. But not only that, what I also discovered was that there were still 5 residents still living on that footprint. So to me, that meant there was something there that needed to be explored. And so essentially, I had talking to a professor at the college. The story goes, I spoke to a professor at the college. He told me about his research, and I asked him if he felt like he had missed anything, and he said he hadn't talked to the families that were impacted because he felt he had an inclination that they were no longer there, which was contrary to what I discovered because there were still 5 families there. And that pretty much led to what you see here, which is a wealth of material from one family and other members of that community about the demise of their neighborhood from when it was thriving to where it is today. So this imagery is important to show because as you can imagine, as someone that didn't know about the history of the community, to now see all this in front of me and for you all to see this in front of you, it just goes to show that, number one, the community and the families there, this is really important to them. This really impacted them, and in some ways, it traumatized them. because of what happened to their communities, which was pretty much out of their control. They felt like they did not have the resources that were helpful in order for them to navigate this. And they felt like they were pretty much ignored. And one of the families, James Johnson, who I have to give a huge amount of credit for even having saved this with no one outside of the community even knowing that some of these documents existed for over 60 years of material that he collected and organized. It is because of him that we are here today. And so I just showed this to put you in the shoes of the people who experienced what was said as an injustice to their community. I actually wanted to point out, what's interesting on this slide is that you see this from the perspective of not just local government playing a role in this, but you see where you see the council votes 5-2, that's a local government decision. Then you see, like on the left side of your screen, the college seeking approval to expand, which is a university-led initiative. And then under that, you see a little snippet from a letter we found from the Office of Attorney General from the Commonwealth of Virginia, which is working on behalf of the college to condemn property. So this is not just a local Newport News issue. This is not just a city council issue. This is not just a college issue. This is a collective, systemic dismantling of a community by several parties in power across the state of Virginia. So I went over the timeline here. This is just for your reference for later, but essentially what happened in Newport News, which was the launching point of our investigation, is in the 1960s, the Black community wanted to grow. They were targeted by white city officials. Despite having cheaper options available, they seized 60 acres from the Black neighborhood. Over the next couple years, ensuing decade, the college quietly began discussing a second larger expansion. Quietly is a very key word there because this was unknown to the residents at that time. In the 1980s, the college attained state approval to extend the campus boundary. So the remaining homeowners, some of them sued in a federal lawsuit. The case was dismissed, so they lost that effort to save the community. And then following that dismissal, this is where it gets interesting in terms of how this trickled down into where we are today. University officials, including former President Paul Tribble, who was the longest serving president of Christopher Newport University, promised not to negotiate with owners unless they approached them first and promised not to invoke eminent domain. However, our reporting found that some of that was actually not the case, that residents were pressured. They felt pressured to sell because they were approached by university officials. And as you saw in that previous slide, that in recent years, as early as the 2000s, that the state worked on behalf of the college to seize more properties by eminent domain. The college also did their own exploration of eminent domain. And today, in 2024, there's still just only 5 homes from that Black community that remain. So this is just a quick overview of how this looked across the state at the 3 colleges that we looked at in our investigation. Of course, Christopher Newport was a launching point, so we've already went over that issue. Old Dominion University displaced thriving Black middle-class community called Lambert's Point. It was leveled in the 60s and 70s for what was also a branch college of William & Mary, because Christopher Newport was also a branch college of William & Mary at the time as well. And a lot of residents were displaced there, at least 150 families, 140 buildings that covered 40 acres. University of Virginia actually wiped out an entire Black community called Vinegar Hill. It was a thriving Black community as well, and it had been a generational community, so that community was even, some would say, older than some of the other 2 communities in the examples above. So I'm not going to read all of this, but the central themes here I'll highlight. The central themes we found in this investigation, we looked at Christopher Newport and the colleges that we explored in Virginia, is that one, these were thriving communities. So urban renewal was used and eminent domain was the tool to seize homes from families. And as you may know, urban renewal is, it is portrayed as a tool to revitalize dilapidated communities. Blight was a very popular term used in the 1950s and 60s. But as you can see, based on the research that and the reporting that was done in Uprooted, these were actually thriving Black communities. In Newport News example, they were actually looking to expand and build more middle-class neighborhoods. There was even a NASA engineer in that community. And for history's sake, because I would love to just drop a little history note here, if you've seen the movie Hidden Figures, he worked with Katherine Johnson. So there were these thriving communities. There was resident pushback. A lot of times, that part of the narrative isn't really made prominent, but it was something that we discovered in our reporting, and we wanted to make sure that was especially known about the fight that these residents engaged in to save their community. So there was strong resident pushback. And then a lot of these residents were offered less than what their properties were valued at. In Newport, you see the last paragraph here says Newport News paid them 20% less than what their properties were valued. And then former residents of the Lamberts Point community, they also believe that they were not paid a fair price. So those were the kind of the three central themes that we uncovered in the series reporting. And this here kind of brings us to present day, because not only was this done in the 1950s and 60s, but another major revelation from this series was that this extended into today. So not just in the 1950s and 60s, but the 1970s, the 1980s, even the 90s, and up until the early 2000s. As you can see, the playbook pretty much was take some of the community and then expand out to take the rest of it. Whether that was intentional or not, we may never know, but that is the playbook that exists here based off of what the reporting shows. And what was shocking to me coming into this reporting was that a taking in the 1960s could be impacting residents who still live on a campus today, on a campus that was once their community, and that even in the early 2000s, eminent domain was a tool that these colleges used to try and take these properties. Oh, wait, I actually want to go back to this really quickly. So on the right side of your screen, I love to show proof of reporting. So on the right side of your screen, you see there was a resolution by the Board of Visitors at Christopher Newport University during the early years of President Paul Tribble's tenure that shows that they were seeking to negotiate sales with residents, that two, they claimed that they negotiated these in good faith, but because they failed to reach a failed settlement, the board voted to approve the president, Tribble at the time, of exploring or directing whatever actions necessary, by words here, whatever actions are necessary to acquire the following properties by eminent domain. So that's like visual documentation of this happening even as early or as recent as the 2000s. So now we're going to get into a little bit of the research. This photo here is a photo that we took at Mr. Johnson's dining room table. It shows the length at which he went through to document his community and the demise of his community. Not to paraphrase what he said to me, not because he expected someone to discover it one day, but that he wanted people to remember what the community was about. So, I think he intentionally, initially he intended on just passing this down because, he's not sure if he can even pass his home down that he lives in right now to his descendants. So at best, he could document with photos, newspapers, land records, all kinds of documents that he's just been holding on to save some memory of a community that he loved, that it used to exist. So here I wanted to get into, I said earlier, we're going to talk about some of the challenges. I picked these particular challenges because I do think that this is also speaking to some of the systemic issues and even conducting research in the state of Virginia. And I thought that may be of interest to you all as members of this commission and also as some members of the legislature in Virginia. So number one, what was surprising in the research that was done to explore how properties were acquired that I discovered that and this is just for Newport News because obviously this is our case example, but that in the city of Newport News, historical property data is pretty much overridden on their website, on their real estate assessor website and their mapping, their GIS mapping site once that data changes or evolves into a different description. So pretty much what that means is that there's no way of keeping historical data outside of whatever deeds might exist. But it's basically like someone did all the work to create a map that then once that map was updated for any particular reason, the map that it was initially created is no longer, like the technology around that no longer is existing. So I'll show you an image of that in a second to help you wrap your head around what I'm actually saying. And then separately, this has actually been an issue that has come up not just with me, but with other reporters in the Commonwealth over years of reporting and trying to examine decisions made by colleges across the Commonwealth. But there's a FOIA exemption that you all are probably already aware of, that presidential papers from colleges and universities and working papers and correspondence are exempt from disclosure. And obviously, you know that what that means is that the colleges could provide that, but they have the opportunity or option not to. And I will show you an example of what that looks like from the research that we did covering Christopher Newport University. But the implications for that is that given that, the former president of the college had a lot of influence over the expansion, we weren't even able to access any correspondence as minute as collaboration or university university announcements to explore and create a better timeline or more thorough timeline of how in later years the college approached acquiring land from these residents. The last thing that was interesting when we first started our investigation is that when we went to Christopher Newport, which is again a public institution, to access archives from their library, we were told we needed permission from the librarian to access those documents. And that is not just something I've experienced. I've talked to someone recently who is also doing research, who actually is a student at the college who also experienced the same thing. I mean, they were able to access those documents, but this kind of speaks to the larger question of why would one need permission to access archived documents at a public college and university, at a library? So here is an example, a visual example of what I mean by data is no longer accessible on the website when it is changed. So this is a snippet of a map overlooking Christopher Newport University. As you can see in the highlighted blue, there is an address that references, which is 236 Prince Drew Road. Historically speaking and factually speaking, 236 Prince Drew Road does not encompass all that is in that rectangle. It actually only encompasses a corner of what's in that rectangle over to the left of your screen. And so pretty much what this means is that once the rest of those parcels that existed, which roughly estimating probably was about 10 to 15 or more homes, probably more than that, once they were all acquired, they were merged into one parcel. So now if you were to look at the historical acquisition sales, assessments of that property and you were seeking to do that research using this mapping tool and using the real estate assessor's website, you cannot do that. You would literally have to do the work that someone already had done before this, if this had been stored, to then go and redo that research and create something like that for yourself. Separately, this is the FOIA exemption that I had mentioned earlier. I highlighted where it says presidents or other chief executive officers of any public institution of higher education in the Commonwealth are exempt from having their working papers and correspondence disclosed. Our reporting showed that this is pretty significant for Virginia because most states do not specifically language their FOIA exemption this way. There are some protections for universities and university officials in other language, but specifically to denote that presidents and other chief executive officers of public institutions of higher education are exempt from having to disclose these papers is pretty unique, and it's pretty unique to the state of Virginia. On the right side of your screen, you will see that this is a letter I received from a FOIA officer at Christopher Newport that I excerpted, showing some of the materials that were withheld from us when we were seeking to explore some of the decisions that were made by former President Tribble. You can read this for yourself, but, university updates to the Board of Visitors. Also, by the way, this was in a box of materials that were from Board of Visitor meetings, which are also public meetings, right? So we weren't able to access. Also worth noting, these were documents that were dated, that were in existence or have been created between the late 90s and early 2000s. So this exemption goes far beyond current considerations of what presidents are looking at or considering. This is such a blanket exemption that it made it difficult for us to even see decisions that were made in like 1994. Finally, I wanted to just leave you all with some final notes and takeaways from the research and the subject experts that we spoke with and featured in Uprooted. This image is an image of a church that existed on adjacent to the campus of Christopher Newport University that was also moved to a different location in Newport News for expansion efforts for the Department of Transportation in Virginia as well as for the college. Okay, so a few takeaways here just to kind of highlight what I have here. One of the takeaways from this investigation is that, as mentioned, these remaining residents, like the Johnsons, who still live or are hanging on to their homes in these communities, are still kind of left in the dark on what that means for them in terms of living out the rest of their lives or passing down their homes to their descendants. These are excerpts from the reporting, directly from the reporting that we did for Uprooted. And that is the sentiment that rang very clearly for this community in Newport News, the residents that are still remaining, but it actually speaks to a larger question of why don't they know what will become of their homes while they are still living in their homes. History and narrative, this kind of speaks to why this story exists. As I mentioned at the beginning, it was a discovery that was shocking for me because I had not known about the history of the college and the displacement of those property members that lived off of Shoe Lane, and to mention other streets, Moores Lane, Prince Drew Road, and Warwick Boulevard, to represent the community collectively. But the acknowledgement of that is, in their opinion, very minimal and overlooks the actual harm done to them by not just local government, but the college itself, as well as their fight to save the community. So that narrative, because of our reporting, is now more public. But as you will probably discover in your research, there's so many stories that have not been told. And then finally, repair. I wanted to leave you all with something that was shared with us with an expert that we interviewed for this, who's also a great resource for exploring this issue, DeVarian Baldwin. He's a professor at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. He has a book about this and the overarching impact of how universities are, in his own words, plundering our cities. And he acknowledged in his analysis that, these colleges are, in some ways, helpful to the economy of these cities, right? And that is important to understand. But also what is important to understand is that the prosperity and greatness that has come, with the profound cost to those host communities where they sit, and that must be accounted for and that must be repaired. And so what I wanted to leave you with is this image, which is an image of a house on Prince Drew Road, which still is there today. It is one of the 5 houses that exists on what is now the campus of Christopher Newport University, and these residents don't even have a real driveway. In order to access their house, they drive through a parking lot on campus, up a dirt path, and as you can see, their cars are even parked on grass. Right behind them is some sorority, I believe some sorority and fraternity housing, and what you can't see to the left of the screen is some residential dorms. With that being said, thank you so much for your time, and I left my contact information at the bottom of this presentation if you all have any questions for me.
Okay, Brent, excuse me. Okay.
Yep, I'm sorry.
Yep, what?
Madam Chair, I was just asked her, the presenter, how can we get a copy of the presentation? I know you had a barcode, but I was trying to see.
Yes, I will make sure to give it to the appropriate person here to make sure it's distributed across the commission.
Ms. Kellam, listen, we want to extend to you a thank you, just a profound thank you for the presentation that you have made and the insight that I hope that each of us have gained, even as much as we have had conversations. And I know there are individuals actually on the commission, on the what is it, task force maybe for Christopher Newport, but it has been certainly an eye-opener for some of us in terms of what you have shared with us today.